So we're here I'm at the Dora Maar House and in France, and Kia is in New York, correct?
Yes,
And, and when, remind me again what year you were here,
I
2007,
believe
8, 9,
11. I think it was 2011.
11. Okay,
Yeah.
2011. A resident here, a fellow here at the Dora Maar
A
House.
decade ago. A decade.
Yeah, yeah. We're still going on. I can't believe it. And at the time when you were here, you were, I think you started working on your first novel.
I was still in the first draft of my first novel.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. Actually,
Um,
Naomi, who is one of the people watching right now, I was at her home and also working on the first. No, I actually at her home, I very much started the second draft, but I still had not shown it to anybody. So
right.
three drafts.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, let me read your little bio, and then we'll do. So Kia Corthron's debut novel that we were just talking about, "The Castle Across the Magnet Carter," was the winner of the 2016 Center for Fiction First Novel Prize and a New York Times Book Review Editor's Choice. She was the 2017 Breadloaf Shane Stevens Fellow on the novel. She's also a nationally and internationally produced playwright. For her body of work for the stage, she has garnered the Wyndham Campbell Prize for Drama, the Horton Foote Prize, the United States Artist Jane Addams Fellowship, and the Flora Roberts Award, and also the Dora Maar Fellowship in 2011. She was born and raised in Cumberland, Maryland, and lives in Harlem, New York City. And Moon and the Mars is her second novel. So welcome, Kia, and welcome everybody who's here who knows about the program and who doesn't know about the program. One of the things that we've been doing since it's sort of been a nice thing since COVID started, we started doing these webinars with our authors and artists who have had openings or book publishing or whatever all over and weren't able to do the regular book tour. But in a way, it turned out to be a great thing because we can connect. It gives a kind of accessibility that we didn't have before. We can connect with our alumni and our past authors, and we can just get a chance to talk and catch up, which is really great, and to share and celebrate their work, which is fabulous. So I want to try to continue doing this if we can. It's kind of like our salons that we have here at the Dora Maar House once a month, but this allows people from all over the world to join. And so Kia, it's great, lovely having you.
Yeah.
I thought what I would just start with, because it struck me when I saw the title of this book, Moon and the Mars, is wanted to start with your titles, because I know your first novel has that wonderful title that comes from the kind of child's misunderstanding of the language.
Mhm.
Can you tell us about this title, how you came with?
Yeah. Well, it's also a misunderstanding, although I don't want to give away too much because I think it comes halfway through the book and then everybody knows when it comes to it. So I don't want to spoil it too much, but it is, it's, the first one was a child's misspeaking of the title. This one is a drunk misspeaking of the word. And so what should have been Mars and the Moon came out Moon and the Mars. So you'll see it when it comes.
Yeah. I mean, what I thought was interesting about it was that it really shows your play with language.
Mm-hmm.
And and I felt like that's part of your background as a playwright in a way. That voice, the novel is really centered around the voice of this one character, Theo, right? She's the child protagonist. She's observing the world around her in New York City, but mostly the Five Points area, around the years of the Civil War. And I was just thinking, it to me, when I started reading it, it was very Kia. Like I heard that I could see your style from the first novel. But I also wondered, like, which is your way in? Is it the voice first, or is it the historical place and time? Like, what was your entrance into the story for you as a writer?
Well, this was definitely, I did lots of research first. I was actually really, this maybe more than any of my other books or any of my works, I should say, was really intimidated because it's the middle of the 19th century. So Castle Cross, this starts in 1941. where the characters are young, and that's like my mother's generation, so it didn't go back further than this. But this one went way beyond anything I know.
Right.
So also it was, so the main character is a girl. So there was a lot in 5 Points, which was the most impoverished district of New York City at that time. And the book goes 1857 to 1863. So it's leading into the Civil War and then into the Civil War. And so there was a lot of intermingling with Black and Irish, especially in 5 Points, including marriages and lots of children who were biracial. And she is a product of that. When I wanted to explore with this novel, Black and Irish relationships, it seemed to make the most sense to me if I dealt with a child who was of each community. And my first novel, Castle Cross, has 4 male protagonists. So with this novel, I thought I wanted to focus more on the women. So the main character is a girl, and most of the characters, her aunts, her grandmothers, are women. So so yeah, so it took me quite a while to find that voice, because it was just intimidating for me, as well as one of the characters, who is one of her aunts, not by blood, but by adoption, because she was an escaped slave that the family took in. And so so I also didn't want to be stereotypical with the slave language. And then of course the whole Irish language, which is and I grew up in an African American culture, and so that was something new, and Irish language in the mid 19th century.
Yeah,
And,
yeah, yeah. The
I was like,
challenging book.
yes. And as far as all of the English, I kept my etymology dictionary close at hand. So
Yeah. So we had talked about that. But I was going to ask you about this later, but we had talked about this ourselves in our earlier conversation about dialect, because you did have to, because you stick with this voice, but it's really a voice novel. So there's these characters, and she has these. She's sort of a bridge between these two communities: the African American community and the Irish community,
yeah, because it's
and of
first
course all the
person.
aunties.
Yeah,
Pardon
it's
me?
first. I'm saying it because it's first person, so it's all in her voice. Yeah.
Right, right, right. So yeah, and so tell us a little bit about how you decided to how you researched the dialect, the Irish side.
Yeah, yeah. So so I knew that there's, let's be realistic. There's no way I'm going to get any fluency in this. But what I was looking for was some sort of syntax, a little trick that, because obviously I'm not writing the accent. I'm writing the syntax that I hope will trick the reader into hearing the accent, basically. So
Mhm.
so there were a few things, but the main trick that that I found was coming from the Irish language, which, by the way, many people, certainly Americans, sometimes when I've said, speaking in Irish before, sometimes they would correct me. They say, "You mean Gaelic?" And I'm like, "No, I mean Irish," because they don't realize that Irish was a language. You could say Irish
Right.
Gaelic, because Gaelic was an umbrella of several languages. You could say Irish Gaelic or Irish, but Gaelic is just vague. It's not just that. So coming
Right.
from the syntax of that language, when that grammar went into English, Irish English, uh, Hiberno English, sometimes it's called, there is a word after becomes an auxiliary verb. So if you want to say, I went to the store, you could say, I'm after going to the store. If you wanted to say, I just went to the library, you could say, I'm after going to the library. No, I'm sorry, I'm only after going to the library. So I sort of
Yeah.
that was one of my little tricks. So
I read that, and it's really interesting because that's sort of what you do in Haitian Creole. There's a word you add to make it past, like map bini, it pushes it into the past, and it's a little tag word. It's very
oh
interesting.
yeah, yes, yeah, yeah.
Like, yeah,
For people listening, Gwen, because you grew up in Haiti, right? For people who
yeah, part of
understand
that,
that. Yes,
right?
yes, yeah.
So, okay, do you want to do your Irish reading right now to get, I know
Okay,
you're,
there's
I know
two
Kia's
sections.
gonna do a reading from the book that's, and she's debuting her Irish
Yes.
accent,
There's
right?
two sections. If we have time, there's a section I always read, but this is a new one. Please forgive me if there is anyone that knows Irish out there, the Irish accent. This is the very first time I'm reading it. It's funny because I've been reading the other section, which is between Theo and Miriam, the escaped slave, which I'll read it if we have time
You'll
later.
read that later.
But,
I'll
yeah,
read it too.
but at some point I said, when I did my launch, I kindly, wonderfully had a wonderful actor, Niall Powderly, who's Irish American, but spent a lot of his growing up in Ireland. So that was fantastic.
Yeah, he was
But
like,
I myself, at some point, I thought, okay, I'm telling people this is a book about Black and Irish relationships, but I'm never going to read the Irish because I'm terrified. So this is my Irish debut.
and
So,
this is a very supportive audience, so don't worry.
and thank God, a very small audience for my first time. Let's see. So I just want to, let's see. Where is, okay. So what you need to know, this is 1859. And again, it's 5 points. Kieran is at this point, Kieran was a boy that her from Ireland. He came yeah, from Ireland, and her Irish family took him in. At this point in 1859, it's the summer, and Theo is 9.5 years old, and Kieran is 11. And let's see, I think all you need to know. So she's going to mention her Auntie Siobhan, which I've mentioned before, her Irish grandmother, and her Grammy Cahill, who is her Irish. Auntie Siobhan's her Irish aunt, Grammy Cahill's her Irish grandmother, and Grammy has a table of wares, like, junk basically that she sells. So I think that's all you need to know. And I will try this thing. We hear the music a block away before me and Kieran step inside the dance emporium. Packed, hot, a colored man at the piano, Irish fiddler, colored with the banjo. Everybody dancing, everybody jaunty. Only once did I ever attend a ceilidh back home, say Kieran, smiling. What's a ceilidh? Hold down, Americans say, partner dancing. Then the music stopped and the piano player say, here we go. The dance floor clearing, everybody backing away from the center, Kieran and me craning our necks to see. An Irish man and a colored man come out, shuffling and stomping, finger snapping, heel spinning, clickety, clickety, tap, 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 the fancy footwork. Everyone whooping and cheering, more, more, more. And they give us more. Then Kieran touched my arm, point. As if I couldn't see myself who took the floor replacing the men. Auntie Siobhan lift her dress so we spy her ankles, stomping and clomping, slip, slide, her feet so fast I hardly see 'em rat-a-tat-tatting like rain on the roof. Then a colored man danced right up to Auntie Siobhan, click stomping faster, then she go faster, then he go faster. They ain't partnering, they competing. Everybody clapping and hooting, tap it, tap it, tap it. Auntie Siobhan win. Them both laughing. Then Auntie Siobhan go to the bar, leaning on it, the sweat pouring. Me happy the room's so crowded, she can't see me and Kieran here, seeing her. Other people's dance competing now, but hard for me take my eyes off my auntie. She swig her drink down, then turned to look right at Kieran and me. Give us a wink. Next morning, Auntie Siobhan won the dancing last night. Grammy Cahill's eyes narrow at me over her wares table. And how would you know that? Oh, say nearby Maeve, Grammy's dearest friend and fiercest competitor. Your old granny's the real stepper in the family. Belle of Carey, she was. Grammy, who'd been getting ready to snap at me for being where I shouldn't have been, now go a little pink, then smile. Oh, granddaughter, close your mouth before it fills with flies. What you saw last night when you were where you shouldn't have? They're the steps we brought over from the island. Yes, I had quite the click in my heels, stomping all over the county. Siobhan was the one I passed the magic feed on to. Then I click, click, shuffle, slip, slide. Grammy take to laughing. Maeve say, look like your fancy feet moved down another generation. Grammy's eyes look to the left, look to the right. No customers approaching. Then, sitting in her chair, her feet under the table start to move. Clickety tap, click. That's it.
Brilliant. That was great. So what is great about this scene is you see the real mix of the Irish community with the African American community,
Mm-hmm.
and the cultures intermingling, and tap dancing basically coming from
Mm-hmm.
that, maybe from that tradition. And I
Yes.
was interested because throughout the book you talk a lot about lyrics of songs and sort of the evolution of songs. Can you say a little bit about that in your research, and what you were thinking when you were sort of.
Yeah, no, I loved doing that. It's actually, I have a chapter that oh, somebody bravoed my Irish accent.
Yeah,
Thank
it,
you.
it's very good, I thought. I think it's great.
It was if no Irish people are here, it's okay. Thank you. But yeah, no, it was fun doing this one. It was like fun doing the research. I mean, I like doing research, which I
Yeah.
have to like I had to show you all three things I should. Here is my book,
Oh,
Moon and
great,
Law.
yeah.
This is the version here in the States. This is the UK version, which looks a little different. And I just have to say, because I was just talking about research, Gwen very much understands, because I have to say, this is an amazing book that Gwen wrote that has to do with, it's called The Nine, and it has to do with her great aunt, who was one of 9 women who, as it says, the true story of a band of women who survived the worst of Nazi Germany. They were
Cute, cute.
they were with the resistance, and it's an amazing book. And so, so yes, please get that.
Thank
But
you.
Gwen knows how amazing research. She's also research.
I am.
And yes, and there was just the songs really placed it in that context, and it was just also really interesting, like that. Here's an example that there was a drinking song that ends when Johnny fill up the bowl. It was an Irish drinking, or at least the Irish did in the Irish pubs. I'm not sure it was originally Irish, but then all during the war became when Johnny comes marching home. Things like that were just really interesting. And of course, one that really developed a lot was what started as John Brown's body lies in Boulder, which even before that, it was like this religious camp song. And it was just interesting watching at that time how those songs leading to the Civil War, how they kept changing, and ultimately became, of course, the Battle Hymn of the Republic. And
Right. Actually, it's funny. I think maybe like that when Johnny comes marching home, I heard it in my head when that came into the text, because I remember that song, and it was powerful. I when to think of that whole history behind it. I learned it as a little kid,
yeah,
and then suddenly there was, oh, it's about a guy. It's pretty intense.
yeah.
So yeah,
When it first comes and you saw the lyrics of the drinking song, did you get it was
right.
then, or did you get it later? Because I was thinking people may not get it till later, but it's the same
I,
chapter. So I do a
yeah,
whole
yeah, no.
chapter. I mean, there's a couple songs in other chapters, but there's one whole chapter that I call battle hymns, and it's a whole
That's
chapter,
right.
a whole lot of songs. So
Right. In fact, I mean, let's talk about research, because this is like a really heavily researched book, which is really a kind of retelling of the Civil War in a way, or these these bits about the Civil War that I had no idea. I mean, for example, the Brooks brothers uniforms that you talk about.
Oh yeah, exactly.
Tell our audience about
Yeah. So it's definitely me calling out a few people. So Brooks Brothers, that fancy place. I would say it's a history of New York in the Civil War, at least up to
Yes.
63. Yes, 1863. Yeah, they made these really shoddy uniforms that would they were basically these old rags that would melt in a rain, would melt off the backs of the soldiers. J.P. Morgan made these rifles that he bought, these old rifles for $3 and sold them for $22 to the military, to the army, and it would
Right.
shoot the thumbs off. It would like backfire and shoot the thumbs off of the Union soldiers. So yeah, these entities got wealthy
Right.
from, or were wealthy and got wealthier from doing really shoddy crap during the Civil War. And by the way, the material was called shoddy. That was the name, the brand name of it,
And that's how we have that
and
word.
that's where the word came from. Yes. Yeah.
Amazing. So, in fact, for me, for example, I didn't know about the commutation fee, which
Oh,
was,
that's the big thing. Yeah. 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 The big thing was that, well, in New York, when they finally did the draft, it was quite a while before the war had been going on quite a while before they instituted a draft, a couple of years. And, uh, and in New York, Black men could not enlist. It was against the law. They could go to Boston. There was the famous
Boston.
Massachusetts,
Right.
but yeah, not. And the irony was that because of slavery, Black men were very much itching to go. Many of them, they really wanted to, but they were
Right.
not allowed to. The Irish volunteered in droves, and then we're also by this time we're up for, by the time the draft came, a lot of Irish had been lost, had been wiped out because they volunteered in such huge numbers for the worst battles. Because if anyone knows anything about Civil War history, those battles were really bloody. And
Massacres, huge massacres on
yes,
both
yes,
sides.
yeah, yeah. So, and when one aside won, they suffered huge losses,
Right.
with Gettysburg. It was, now this is both killed and wounded. It's not all killed, but 50,000. I mean, at this time, that's like, yes, that's incredible.
It's incredible.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So what happened was when the draft went into effect, you could get out of it if you paid $300. And this was the way they were funding the war. Of course, that basically meant that poor people were going to go, and the Irish were the poorest of the people who were eligible to go, since Black people could not go. And wealthy people could get out of it. And there was something, it wasn't as, it was obviously short-sighted. It wasn't quite as blatantly insidious as it sounds, because there was something about that Lincoln, he was trying to fund the war, and he thought if they didn't put a number on it, it would go crazy in the black market with being
Right.
but still it was very short-sighted. And yeah.
And it does live, it sort of, as your book kind of illustrates, sort of creates or helps, adds to this tension, builds
Yeah.
this tension between the poor Irish and the poor Blacks, and
Yes.
because Civil War for the Black community was obviously about slavery,
Yes.
and it wasn't quite the same thing for the Irish community, that they didn't actually, in fact, from the book, you really kind of weave in beautifully Lincoln's deep ambivalence to abolition.
Yeah, yeah. I actually should say, and I hope this was clear. It wasn't, he wanted to get elected. So he was just basically, he was a liberal and not a radical. So he morally was against slavery, but to get elected, and his speech said as much, that he hated slavery, but that he would leave it where it was, but he would just not let it move to more
West.
And that's, yes. And for many people, there's so many theories about the Civil War, but one of them is that that it didn't come from slavery in the South. It came from slavery in the West, because people, some abolitionists, depending on how radical they were, but some abolitionists who were disgusted by slavery were okay as long as it didn't gain traction out.
Get further, right?
Yeah.
No, actually, it was for me, there was a lot of that. You're kind of I would use the French word gourmand, but you include everything. Like Theo is sort of seeing the whole. It reminds me a little bit of like a Candide or Tristram Shandy. She's kind of this person that's seeing this whole world around her, and we see all these different, you know what I mean? Through her eyes, we get this like 360 degrees of what's going on in those years, each one of those years. So it
Yeah.
must have been kind of fun for you to do in a way, I imagine.
Yeah. And also one of the challenges that I liked doing, but it was tricky at times was, so she's 7 at the beginning and
Mhm.
13 by the big climax. And so she gains knowledge and maturity.
Right.
So early on, there are moments um, I where the reader may know what's going on, but she doesn't quite. Actually, if I read the other section,
Yeah,
that's
that's what I was gonna say. The other section, it talks about that. The
yeah,
other section that we talked about you reading has the wonderful her auntie Miriam,
yes,
who's
yes,
an
yes.
escaped slave,
Uh-huh.
and uh, yeah, I mean, you know, the novel has all these wonderful characters. These aunties, especially, are quite something, and some of her street urchin friends. But yeah, why don't you read the one about her auntie Mary, who is a character? Yeah,
Okay, let's see what I just do with
I
it.
don't know if there's something else you want to say about it to introduce it.
Yeah, I'll just say, wait, let me get it. It's so this one is 1858, so it's actually a year before. So Theo was 8.5 years old. So yes, Miriam's escaped slave, and she was living with Theo and her grandmother in 5 Points. Theo, by the way, lives between both her Irish and her Black grandmother, so the two tenements in 5 Points. But Miriam is newly married and now living with her husband a little further uptown in the West 30s. I gives you cabbage and peas and corn for your Grammy. We got plenty. And Auntie Miriam spread out her arms to prove it. Her voice sound like a smile, even though I don't see it. The net hanging from her garden hat so thick can't make out her face. Her garden gloves cover her hands, though now and again she slip them off brief, let the earth pour through her fingers. You're good at gardening. You're good at gardening, Auntie Miriam. As the Ace Ricer, South Carolina. And cotton picker? Auntie Miriam shake her head. Rice and cotton, two different skill. Take train and stop. I's much obliged for your help, Theo, but what you just pulled was not a weed. Inside, Auntie Miriam put some cabbage and peas and corn in my gunny sack, then pour us coffee, slice the bread. Auntie Miriam and Mr. Samuel's house, big, front room, plus bed closet, 3 rooms. The little bed closet Auntie Miriam called the room of hope. Auntie Miriam, like never was no depression your house, and you and Mr. Samuel got a yard. She nods, sit back, stare out her little window on her little garden. 'Twas a devotion. Mr. Samuel grew up 5 Points, never he think to remove. But I longs for the air, this he do for me, space the only thing I miss about Dixie. And my hands knowing the magic, knowing how to make soil deliver. Now her eyes turn to me. I got to go out little while. You help me? I love helping Auntie Miriam. She opened a big jar of the concoction, almond oil, shea butter, beeswax. While I spread the liniment over her left arm and hand and back of her neck, she stared into her little round looking glass set on the table, applying it to her cheeks and chin and forehead and eyelids. Auntie Miriam looked funny, light skinned her face and neck and hands, and dark everywhere else. But face and neck and hands, the only parts shows when she out and about, so them's the only places she need the potion. Here's what I reckon. Auntie Miriam remember Miss Sally, colored boarder who make herself light and pretty for the gentleman, and Auntie Miriam want to be with the fashion. Auntie Miriam Africa at home, mulatto in the street. I amble with her to Miss Philippa's down in Little Africa, Greenwich Village. Auntie Miriam hand Miss Philippa some coin, and Miss Philippa passed to Auntie Miriam a little pouch. Miss Philippa give a few instructions. That's pretty much all the words they use up. I stroll with Auntie Miriam back up to the 30s. Guess you's big enough. There's days I worries, slave catcher right round the bend, but other days figure it never be. Why master bother? Years I'm ripe and being cultivated, yet not once he planted in me nothing fertilized to increase his crop of darkies. You understand? I nod, but I don't know what Auntie Miriam's talking about. In the distance, the thumber rumble. And I knows Mr. Samuel and me only married a short spell. Still, Miss Philippa know her herb, gonna help me fill the room of hope. And Auntie Miriam's right fingers gentle caress Miss Philippa's pouch, left hand caress her belly. Then the sky opened, sheets hammering, we raced to her house. Even in the rain, Auntie Miriam's light-skinned cream barely smudged. Want me help clean you up, Mr. Auntie Miriam? No, I gets to it. I look at her. Usually she liked to wash the high yellow off second she walked through the door. Then I remember Mr. Samuel gone before crack of dawn, didn't get to catch a glimpse of his light wife today. Cloudburst big, not letting up. Getting toward dark and no Mr. Samuel. He got sense enough, wait out the storm, she say. You too, may as well stay the night. Then she pull out a deck. Pick. First, I don't know what. I never done no cards before, never been close to no heart, no diamond. Afraid I'm doing it wrong. Still, I go deep in the pile, glance it fast so she can't see. Leave it back atop as instructed. Auntie Miriam shuffle, pull it out. Deuce of clubs. How'd she do that? Broth and bread then. Time to hit the hay. But she ain't hitting no hay. Auntie Miriam take to her rocking chair, light her smoke, waiting for Mr. Samuel. I never seen Auntie Miriam smoke before, but now she enjoy her pipe like she was born to it. I help with the dishes, Auntie Miriam? I gets to them directly. She puff, eyes on the dark out the window. Wonder why she prolonging a chore. Then I know she don't want to stick her hands in no water yet. Now you really look like my Auntie Miriam. She turned to me, eyebrows a question. Or my mother, I giggle. Except my mother was Irish, she couldn't look like her. Auntie Miriam's eyes stuck on me. I chuckle, but my laugh's starting to lose air. Both us pretty. Light. Her puffin' stop, eyes narrow. You know why I do this, Theo. I stare. Auntie Miriam never stirred to me like that before. I nod. Then why you natter on? I don't know what answer I'm supposed to give to that. She sigh, back to her rockin', eyes back to the window. Me and the crickets wait. I'm a homebody, likes my walls round me. But sometime gots to show my face in the world, the odd errand. I knows you likes cleaning the light skin off, but sometime I likes to wait for Mr. Samuel. Which is just what I reckoned, waiting for him to see her pretty and light, but figure best keep that reckoning to myself. Now Auntie Miriam looked to the looking glass, staring at her fair cheeks. No smile. She speaks soft, like more talking to the mirror than to me. No kidnapping me back whipping chains. South Carolina ain't never finding their dark-skinned Lizzie. Not on the street, no how. Then we both quiet till my yawns sneak up and bellow. In my dream, I'm walking down Broadway with Auntie Miriam, and here come the slave catchers. Then I see Auntie Miriam forgot to put on her light-skinned disguise. Scared for her. You see, Lizzie, one of them say. I shake my head, no, but surely they see my heart pound through my chest. Then Auntie Miriam beside me take to laughing, hold her belly rolling on the ground, the funniest joke. I start to smile and feel my water. wake up, slip outside to the Irish shanty, which is something I recently heard Great Uncle Fergus mutter. But when I said it, Kathleen and Cousin Eileen snapped, call it WC, outhouse, privy. Outside, no more rain, just the mud. Walk back when I'm done. On the stoops, a pail of water for clean and dirty feet. Rub them till they glisten, then step inside. A murmur from the other bed closet. Mr. Samuel must have come home while I was emptying myself. Creep back to the room of hope. Notice the other door ajar. Mr. Samuel washing the light skin off Auntie Miriam. Chimney sweeping, Mr. Samuel always carried the soot filth, but now washed, him darker in me, but lighter in his wife. And on the bed they sit together, her face already clean brown. Now he work her arms. He do it soft, his skin moving slow against hers. Faces close to each other, eyes warm at each other, and where he washed off the light lotion and her brown flesh peeking through, he kisses. His lips against her clean, soft elbow, brown, soft lower arm, muscle and fat, slow and mellow, her deep, shining, deep, dark brown skin, delicate and strong. And the gentle and the tender and the smiling get to feeling so much like something private, like something ought to be only between man and wife, that I get the blush and scurry quiet back to my own room. Good night.
Thank you. Thank you. That's a beautiful scene. And it does illustrate the sort of younger Theo not quite understanding, but understanding intuitively. But
Yes,
also what I liked about it was this sort of, she thinks it's sort of a shame about the skin color, but of course it's the exact opposite. The reason that Miriam is putting on a lighter skin lotion, it's an interesting exploration in a way of that kind of whole that whole question, like trying to pass,
yeah. Well, I think and Lydia, thank you for your comment. She wrote a little comment. But I you know what I think also is that she's not sure it's a shame.
Okay.
But when Auntie Mary glares at her, then she's not sure. So I think,
Uh-huh.
yeah, I think it's all so much, she's learning so much through subtext. So,
Right.
She just thinks, so for, if you haven't read the book, the person she's talking about getting pretty for the gentleman is a prostitute, but she just knows, she doesn't quite understand that either.
Yeah.
But thank you, Naomi, my friend Naomi. But
Yeah.
But so yeah, I think she thinks she's getting pretty, but then when because she just thinks it's the fashion, but then when Auntie Miriam gives her that look, then she doesn't. So yeah, it was interesting really writing it, because by the end, 13, she'd understand, pretty much all that.
Right.
But yeah, she's sort of,
and also she's taken pride in her heritage in a way that it's
yes,
kind of evidence earlier, and I love Miss Phillips, the herb healer, midwife, and abortionist, we could say at one point later.
Yeah.
So I was wondering that so you tackle all these subjects.
Don't say that character, because that's a surprise.
Okay.
But yes,
yes, I won't. But like, how did you find research about the status of abortion at that time period?
I did look it up. Yes, yeah, and it was interesting. Both, and I have it in the book if I remember correctly what I wrote. But it was interesting. Both, I found the legal status, but then one of my Irish American readers first readers asked me about, well, what was the Catholic status, she wondered. And it was interesting that unless it's quick, which that the person feels it, the Catholic Church was fine with abortion. It was until you felt it. So if she skipped her period and didn't feel anything yet, they were fine with it at that time.
Yeah. No, and actually, I think historically in the early, sort of in the 50s and 60s, 1950s and 60s, a lot of illegal abortions were provided by the Catholic nuns and
Mm,
priests, you know, who,
yes, yeah,
so
yeah,
they were helping, you know,
yeah.
young mothers, whatever. And actually, let me see my question. What I what I wanted to ask you about was, because this is something I struggled with sometimes with my material in my book that you so kindly showed everybody, um, was the difficulty of was the difficulty of the material. Especially, I felt it really later on when there's a kind of recounting of a series of lynchings. I think it's Samuel that does it. Um,
Yes, yes, uh-huh.
I mean, was it hard to use that to recount that kind of material? Did you at any point just decide, okay, that's too much, I'm just gonna keep that out? Or, I struggled with that a little bit in my book. There were times when I thought, okay, I'm just gonna, and there were things I read that I wish, that I didn't repeat because I didn't want it to be in there, and this period around the Civil War, I mean,
Mhm.
it's
No, I actually didn't struggle with keeping,
okay.
I mean, it was, um, I'm not gonna go everything that happens in the
Yeah,
book, but it was in this particular instance, there was a limited number of outright lynchings. There were a lot of killings that weren't necessarily
right,
outright lynchings, and
right,
um, so I was very fortunate to find, I think they got this through the Library of Congress, a report that happened 1 year later. So it had like
right,
all these details
right,
in 1864. And it's got, the in the States, there's a movement, say her name, say his name.
right.
For me, it was important to uh,
Name them.
say all their names. So Veronica, my editor, I know is on here someplace. And
Yeah,
um, I, uh, I figured out a way to put in a reason why he could remember all those, because it was really important for me to name
right.
all the names. There's also a similar thing earlier in the book, because Theo becomes friends with a local girl who's half black, half Lenape. And there is an incident out west
Mhm.
of government lynching, basically.
Right.
Um, and it was really important for me as best I could to get all the names. And there was in the New York Times at that time, a reporter went out and witnessed this in Minnesota. And and he, to the best of his ability, wrote down the names of all of the victims of
Mhm.
the Native Americans that were killed out there in this mass hanging. And I so it was, to the best, I mean, to his credit, it was best he could. I really wanted to get the right names, but I looked and looked and couldn't find it. Fantastic copy editor who looked it up and found in a Native American journal the exact names. And to the man's journalist's credit, most of them were right, but a few were off. And
Right.
so, at least according to that, to the best of my abilities, I was able to get their names. So,
Shout out to copy editors, right? I mean, I really so appreciated that process as a writer, as a research heavy
yes,
book.
yeah,
You
yeah,
know, I was just so, yeah, that's amazing. And I read that in your notes afterwards that you had found
yeah.
it's really interesting. So that's interesting. Um, I want to open it up to questions in a little bit, but I just one last thing. I wanted to end with the quote from your book. At one point, Theo says, "Love is blind, and blind is dangerous." I felt
Mhm.
like that was kind of a moment when she of a kind of reckoning. Do you feel like that when you were writing that she was?
Yeah, I mean, I think it, what happens at the end, the climactic part.
We
She's
don't want
growing,
to tell too much.
yes, growing up and growing up and growing up, and then suddenly a whole lot of growing up really fast because of things
Really
that
fast.
happened. And I think because, as I've talked about, the camaraderie between the Irish and
Mhm.
Black communities, and there's a growing tension related to the war, related to privileged Irish American politicians, pitting Irish against Blacks, and also the Republicans, which for people who don't know their history, the Republicans were the good guys then. That was the party of Lincoln. And it was a very new party, actually. And yes, they, who are sort of the comparable to white liberals today, sometimes would hold Blacks in high esteem, but would be very classist against the Irish. And so there were these outer factors, not to mention the commutation clause, all that stuff that those communities. So I think it's a reckoning for her to start seeing that, you know, both sides of her family very much love her, always very much loved her.
Very much so, yeah.
Yes, but start to also see, I mean, it's a little here and there throughout, but, well, what does my Black family think of the other Irish? What do the Irish family think of the other Black people, you know? And she's
right. The difference between her personal relationship and this bigger picture.
Yeah.
And that is also comes out with this beautiful, complicated relationship with Kieran that goes throughout the book. And comes to the end of the book. It's really quite something. I'm not gonna say anything. Yeah. I won't say anything. Okay, well, I'm not giving away anything. So does anyone, if anyone has questions or comments, you can, I see there's some in the chat. We can try to ask if anyone has anything.
Hi. I see Miriam.
Is there an audiobook? Is there going to be an audiobook?
There is an audiobook. I don't know if it's actually, is it ready yet? I don't know, because there is definitely an audiobook, and wonderful actress, because this is when a novelist is also a playwright, that audio people have to deal with the writer wanting to hear the actress, or at least I shouldn't say it wasn't like an audition. Because she has wonderful experience, like 400 books or something she's done. She's got all these awards. But I just want to have a conversation to talk about the characters. And so there is an audio book, but I haven't seen it yet. So I'm not absolutely sure if it's ready yet or not. I have to look into that. I was just thinking that today because I want to hear it.
Yeah, you got to hear it. That'll be really interesting, because I want to, her Irish.
Great with accents. She's actually she's a Black American, but she's great with accents.
Okay. Yeah, interesting. No, that's fun. I think it'll be fun for you to hear it.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe. When you're writing, I imagine you read it out loud to yourself as you write.
You know, I did not with the first book, but with this one I did. And I just wanted at some point, I'm sorry, not as I wrote it. It was actually toward the very end of the process. Right. I just wanted to hear if there were redundancies. So I read the whole. This is an interesting thing, though, about the Irish. When there's a whole bunch of Irish, and I almost did, instead of the Grammy thing, I almost did it with Auntie Siobhan, but what happened in that section, it was a whole monologue. It felt a little redundant to the other piece that I read. So then I went with the Grammy. Right. The thing about it is that when I go through a whole long monologue, because I'm into the Irish, I'm much better with it. But the whole reason I do it is because so you can distinguish the characters. Right. And it is so much harder to jump back and forth. But yeah. But yeah, I did read the whole thing. And yes, when I was doing it, I just automatically went Irish when I went to the Irish characters. So yeah.
Actually, Janice asked, do you have any Irish ancestry?
You want to know something? The first line of the book, Theo says, "Mutt I am." And as I put in the acknowledgements at the end, I said, "Mutt I am," I guess. But I've actually no idea. I've never done my ancestry. My parents are both African American. My grandparents are African American, although they're light. I mean, there's obviously been a lot of mixture. Somebody told me once, so my father grew up on a farm in Virginia. He was one of 9 kids. And they couldn't go they couldn't go to the white hospital. So the midwife would come and deliver the babies, and whatever she wrote on the birth certificate became their name. So some of my cousins are like C-A-R, I'm C-O-R, they're C-A-R. Some of them are like
Right.
C-A-R-T-H-O-R-N-E. It's all a little different. My
Right.
father was Corthorn, C-O-R-T-H-O-R-N. Then he went into the army. They mixed up the R and O, and he could not change it back no matter how hard he tried it. That's how we all became the Corthron bunch. But
Right.
um, but once I said that, and I was with a linguist when I said it was originally Corthorn, and he said, "That's it." And I said, "What?" And I didn't know what was going on. He said he didn't know where my name came from, but he said Thorn is very Scottish.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, that sounds Scottish
Yeah.
to me.
Yeah.
So maybe yours has some Scott. Huh.
Yeah, perhaps, which is very related to
Yeah,
Irish.
exactly right. Interesting. But you did go to Ireland, didn't you, to do some
I
research for the
loved
book?
it. I so you know what? I had always wanted to go to Ireland, and there was
Right.
sort of never the opportunity. But writing the book, it was like I got to make the opportunity, and
Yeah,
so
this has to happen. Right.
yeah, and I was lucky enough that I was able to travel around. Very fortunate because I got a residency way out in Kerry where the fingers jet out into the sea. So when
Uh-huh.
Kieran talks about the beauty, I'm totally talking about this area. And also, it was called Kilrealig. This place, we were in huts that were pre-famine. So I was like living in that time. I mean, it was literally
Beautiful.
yes, yes. And literally, I had to walk, it was like 4 miles or something. We walked to the nearest town, which is like
Uh-huh.
population like 350 people. Like that was the town
Mhm.
to see the St. Patrick's Day parade. It was so cute. But
Oh.
so I was there like 12 days. And then
Uh-huh.
before then, a friend of a friend let me stay at her place in County Clare, the Burren. So I was there 8 days. So then I went to Kerry, crossed over for a couple of days in Dublin. And then a friend of mine, Michael McDonald, who's Irish American, lives in Brooklyn, but he had his Fulbright in Belfast. So then I got to go up to the north for a few days. Then I spent 10 days with my friend Naomi, who is on right now.
Yeah, actually, Naomi has a question. That is a question I wanted to ask you, which is because you write such wonderful portraits of children and young people. What is it about writing from the voice of children that inspires you?
That's funny because Naomi writes a lot of wonderful children too, but Naomi's a playwright. So,
Oh,
um, uh, well, yeah, I don't know. I mean, in Castle Cross, the first third of the book, they're children, and
yeah.
the last 2/3, they're adults. Um, I think with this book, because it's different, it just depends on the subject matter of the book. And I am very good with children's voices. I do know that.
Mhm.
Um, but with this book, I don't know if this was a conscious thing. I think it was more intuitive. But I think what I wanted was, first of all, as I said, somebody who was part of both communities.
Right.
But I wanted to start at a place of innocence where she does not see the tension and growing into more knowledge of that. So I think I wanted to start in a more
Naive
a
or yeah.
place, yeah, of no prejudice in a
Mhm.
way, or not the formal prejudice, and that she grows to understand what prejudice is.
Right.
So
And
yeah.
then and it's interesting because I think I said it earlier, as the audience, we kind of know more than her. I mean, at least at the beginning,
Yes.
we know what's coming,
Um,
vaguely. We know the history, the war and everything. So there is a kind of tension between what she's seeing and yeah, that kind of, and between what we know as an audience. But it's
yeah.
also kind of you have a really beautiful talent of capturing kind of the way of thinking of a child. This is kind of portraying their unique vision. They're seeing things kind of purely well, not purely, but in a new way, not the way that we would.
Yeah,
It's
thank you. I think that was actually also helpful with that, or it was like a fringe benefit that I hadn't really thought about. In that way, even though this is only a few blocks square, 10 blocks square or something, the
uh,
5 Points district, as a child, you always see new adventures. It's always new.
Yeah,
It gave me
yeah,
a great tool to be descriptive in an organic
absolutely.
way. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, I discovered from you about Seneca Village. I felt really, and Central Park.
A lot of people don't know.
I didn't
More
know about it.
come out, but I certainly, when I first came to New York, it was 88.
Uh-huh.
People told us, I always thought, oh, Central Park was this, all these trees were there forever and they just never cut them down
Right,
from
right,
pre-Columbian times, right? But we
right.
were told, interestingly, when I first got here, oh, no, no, no. It was a slum. It was a wasteland and they cleaned it up, right? And I thought, oh, that's
Oh,
interesting. And then later I found out, oh, that was, that was actually, it was a community.
it was
Yeah.
a community.
Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. That was really quite a tragic part of the book. Well, we're getting to the end of our time, really. We could always keep talking, but I think we should call it a night, an
Well,
afternoon,
I guess
whatever.
you could say that to
Oh,
bookshop.org.
yes.
So,
Yes, I will say, because I'm over here and some of my audience is in France and some of us are in the States, what I always recommend to everyone is to use bookshop.org or go to your local bookstores. Really, we need to support our local bookstores and buy a copy of this wonderful book.
or
It's
order it if they don't have it.
you order it from bookshop.org, have them order it.
Okay, and US.
It's really wonderful. I'm sure
Excellent.
this is, yeah, I'm not gonna name a bookstore because I think everyone's coming from different places. But your local bookstore is a great resource, as is your local library archivist, all of the, you know. So yeah. So thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining us, and I
Thank
will.
you.
There will be a recording available on our YouTube page if you want to recommend other people hearing the interview and the book, which I recommend the book. There we go. Thank you so much, Kia.
Be
Thank
glad.
you. And thank you, everybody, for joining us. Thank you.